The town square was small and quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's name and secrets. Dust swirled lazily along the uneven cobblestones, kicked up by the occasional breeze or the shuffle of tired boots. Wooden stalls leaned slightly to one side, their paint faded from years of sun and wind. The air carried the faint smell of baked bread from the corner bakery, and the tang of metal from the blacksmith's shop. Shadows stretched long across the square as the late afternoon sun dipped behind the rooftops, and the distant sound of a clock tower marked the slow, steady passage of time. It was a place where life moved slowly, yet something about the day felt different, tense, heavy, as if the air itself was holding its breath. In the center of the dusty square stood three small figures, unnervingly still. Each had a rough burlap sack tied tightly over their head, the coarse fabric hiding their faces and muffling any sound. Their hands were bound behind their backs with fraying rope, leaving them awkward and tense as they shifted on their feet. Their clothes were worn and dusty, patched in places where life had clearly been hard. The children seemed almost invisible to the bustling town around them, yet the quiet tension they carried made the air feel heavier. Every now and then, one of them would tug slightly at the ropes or shuffle nervously, revealing the fear and uncertainty coiled inside. Passers-by glanced briefly, some with pity, most with discomfort, and then moved along, unwilling to linger. It was a heartbreaking sight. Innocence trapped and voiceless, waiting for someone, anyone, to care enough to notice. Leaning against a crooked wooden post was a hand-painted sign, its letters uneven and smudged, yet painfully clear. Orphans, $3 each. The paint was faded and peeling, evidence of sun and rain wearing away at its surface. But the message remained sharp and unsettling. The words hung in the air like a warning, drawing the eyes of the townsfolk and the hesitant curiosity of strangers passing through. Children, usually full of laughter and mischief, were reduced to mere objects for sale, their humanity overshadowed by the harsh price tag. A hush seemed to fall over the square as people glanced at the sign and then quickly away, uneasy with the stark reality it proclaimed. The sign, simple as it was, carried a weight that made even the wind seem still, and every heartbeat in the square seemed to echo the silent question, who would dare to claim them? A low murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of curiosity and unease. Whispers floated from one person to the next, some shaking their heads, others casting nervous glances at the orphans. "Too much trouble," someone muttered. Another voice added, "Who knows what mischief they'll bring?" The children shifted slightly under the weight of invisible judgment, their small bodies tense with fear. People avoided eye contact, unwilling to meet the hollow gazes hidden beneath the burlap sacks. The square, usually alive with chatter and laughter, felt heavy and uneasy, as if the town itself recoiled at the sight. Every footstep that drew nearer to the children seemed hesitant, reluctant, until finally the crowd began to drift away, leaving the orphans standing alone in the dusty silence, waiting for someone, anyone, who might care enough to reach out. Mary walked slowly along the edge of the square, her eyes scanning the familiar shops and stalls, yet her mind elsewhere. She hadn't planned to stop, not today, not for anything. The weight of her own loneliness pressed on her, and the bustle of the town felt distant, almost unreal. She didn't need bread, didn't need nails, didn't need anything really, not anymore. Yet something in the air made her pause, a subtle shift in the wind, or a strange quiet that pulled her gaze toward the center of the square. That's when she saw them, three small figures, silent and still, sacks tied over their heads, hands bound behind them. For a moment she kept walking, telling herself it wasn't her business. But there was something about the scene, something unspoken and heavy, that made her slow her pace and glance again. Mary froze, a shiver running down her spine. Among the muffled rustlings of the three children, one tiny voice broke through, barely audible, yet unmistakable. It was her name, spoken softly, almost as if testing the air, almost as if unsure it would be heard. Her heart skipped a beat. How could a child know her name? She looked closer, leaning in, her curiosity battling with caution. The other children remained still, silent, their faces hidden, but this single whispered sound seemed to pierce the dusty quiet of the square. Questions flooded her mind. Who were they? Why were they here? And most importantly, Why did that voice call her, of all people? For the first time that day, Mary felt a tug she couldn't ignore, a pull that made her stop in her tracks and reconsider everything she had planned. Mary's mind raced, each thought louder than the last. She had no memory of ever meeting this child, yet the sound of her own name on such fragile lips sent a strange, unfamiliar warmth through her chest. Who could have told them about her? Could it be a trick or some cruel coincidence? Her eyes searched the square, hoping for a hint, a clue, anything to make sense of the impossible. The other children shifted slightly, their movements nervous and uncertain, but none spoke. The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered and pressing. Why did this child know her? And more importantly, what did it mean? The answer seemed just out of reach, hidden somewhere in the dusty shadows of the town square, waiting for her to discover it. Mary felt a pull she could not resist, a quiet urgency that demanded she act before the moment slipped away. Mary paused at the edge of the square, her gaze lingering on the three small figures. In the silence, memories crept back, her husband's warm smile, the quiet evenings they had shared, the life they had built together, now gone. The house she returned to each night felt empty, echoing with the absence of laughter and voices she had once taken for granted. Grief had become a constant companion, wrapping itself around her heart like a heavy, unyielding cloak. She had thought she could live without the chaos of family, without the responsibilities and joys children bring. Yet now, watching the orphans stand alone, frightened and forgotten, she felt a strange stirring deep inside, a mixture of longing, guilt, and hope. Could she open her heart again, after so much loss? Could she allow herself to care, even when the pain of loving again was so real? Mary had long convinced herself that her life was meant to be solitary. Children had never been part of her plans, and after losing her husband, the thought of starting a family again seemed impossible, too painful, too uncertain. She had built walls around her heart, telling herself that loneliness was safer than loss, that independence was better than risking hope. The quiet of her empty home had become familiar, almost comforting, a space where she could grieve without interruption. Yet now, standing in the dusty square, seeing the three fragile figures before her, those carefully constructed walls trembled. Something unspoken reached out to her from behind the burlap sacks, a silent plea that she couldn't ignore. For the first time in years, Mary felt the pull of responsibility, of connection, of a family that might still exist, waiting for her to step forward. Mary's heart ached quietly, a steady thrum of loneliness that no bustle or chatter could drown out. Around her, the square pulsed with life. The creak of wooden carts, the clatter of hooves, merchants calling out their wares, children darting between stalls, laughter and shouts weaving together like a living tapestry. Yet none of it reached her. The noise felt distant, almost unreal, as if it belonged to another world. Her grief, deep and unshakable, made the chaos seem sharper, more alien. Each smiling face, each casual conversation, was a reminder of the family she had lost and the life she no longer expected to have. And yet, amidst that contrast, her gaze kept returning to the three silent orphans, their stillness a mirror of her own solitude, quietly daring her to step closer, to break through her pain and risk opening her heart once more. Mary hesitated, caught in the invisible tug-of-war between fear and compassion. Her mind raced, weighing the risks and the unknowns. She could turn away, continue down the familiar path of solitude, and leave the children to their fate, just another tragic sight in the square. Yet something deeper, quieter, insisted she stay. That single whispered name echoed in her ears, a soft, fragile plea that refused to be ignored. Around her, the town went about its business, oblivious to the silent tension unfolding in the center of the square. Every second she lingered felt like a choice between the safety of her empty life and the uncertain, messy, beautiful possibility of caring for these children. And in that pause, the question burned louder than ever. Would she ignore them, or finally act? After a long, tense moment, Mary took a deep breath and made her choice. She stepped forward, reaching into her pocket and pulling out the coins she had carried for everyday necessities. One by one, she handed them over, buying all three children without fully understanding why her heart pushed her to do it. The townspeople watched in stunned silence, whispers of disbelief weaving through the crowd. Why would she take them? Some muttered. shaking their heads. Mary felt a mix of fear and resolve, her hands trembling slightly as she guided the orphans away from the square. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of purpose, a fragile spark of hope. But as she led them toward her empty home, questions gnawed at her. What had she just committed to? And what secrets lay hidden behind those small, anxious faces? The townspeople couldn't stop talking, their voices low but insistent, carrying across the dusty square. Faces turned as Mary walked away, coins clutched tightly in her hand, 3 small orphans trailing behind her. "She's lost her mind," one woman whispered, shaking her head. "A widow, and she takes them all?" another muttered, brows furrowed in disbelief. Children who had been playing stopped and stared, sensing the unusual tension in the air. Even the merchants paused mid-sale, glancing over their shoulders, curious and judgmental. The shock wasn't just about her generosity. It was about the unexpected risk, the defiance of a quiet, lonely life she had built for herself. For the first time in the square, the weight of choice, courage, and compassion became visible to everyone. Yet only Mary knew the depth of what this decision might cost, or give her. As Mary led the 3 orphans away from the square, her heart pounded with a mix of emotions she hadn't felt in years. Fear gnawed at her. Fear of failing them, fear of the unknown, fear of opening her heart only to face more loss. Yet, alongside that fear was a fragile hope, a quiet whisper that maybe, just maybe, this was a chance to fill the emptiness that had consumed her since her husband's death. Curiosity tugged at her as well, pulling her thoughts toward questions she didn't yet dare to ask. Where had these children come from? Who had left them to the mercy of a cruel world? Why did one of them call her name? Each step toward her home felt heavy with possibility, carrying both the weight of responsibility and the glimmer of a life she thought she'd lost, now waiting quietly behind 3 small, uncertain faces. As Mary watched the children shuffle behind her, the sacks over their heads seemed to hold more than just faces. They held secrets, stories, and perhaps a lifetime of pain she could only guess at. Every subtle movement, every nervous shift of weight hinted at something unseen, something waiting to be revealed. She couldn't help but wonder what lay hidden beneath the coarse burlap: frightened eyes, bruises, a spark of hope. The questions spun in her mind, unanswered and insistent, each one pulling her forward with a mixture of dread and anticipation. Whatever truths were tucked away under those sacks, Mary knew that discovering them would change everything, for the children and for her. The quiet suspense lingered, thick and heavy, daring her to look closer and confront the unknown. Mary led the 3 orphans along the dusty path to her house, a small, lonely structure at the edge of town. Its wooden walls creaked with age, and the windows reflected the fading light of late afternoon, giving the home a quiet, somber air. Inside, the rooms were empty and cold, stripped of the warmth that a family's presence could bring. The floorboards groaned underfoot, and shadows pooled in the corners, as if the house itself were unsure how to welcome them. The children shuffled nervously, hesitant to step inside, glancing at one another with wide, uncertain eyes. Every small sound, the click of the latch, the scrape of shoes on wood, made them flinch. Mary felt a pang of sympathy and unease. This was a house that had known grief and silence for far too long, and now it held 3 frightened children whose lives had been defined by fear. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, heavier than ever, yet she felt an unfamiliar spark of hope flicker within. Slowly, hesitantly, the children began to peek out from beneath the coarse burlap sacks. Their small, wary eyes scanned the unfamiliar room, darting between Mary and the shadows of the empty house. Every creak of the floor, every movement of Mary's hands made them flinch, their bodies tense with fear and suspicion. They had learned long ago that trust was dangerous, that kindness could vanish as quickly as it appeared. Yet, beneath the trembling and hesitation, a spark of curiosity flickered, tiny, fragile, but persistent. They wanted to know who this woman was, why she had brought them here, and whether this strange, quiet house could somehow become a place of safety. Mary watched them closely, her own heart aching at their fear, and wondered how long it would take for these 3 frightened souls to let down the walls they had built around themselves. The first night passed in quiet, tentative movements. The children sat on worn wooden chairs, carefully picking at the simple meal Mary had prepared. their eyes occasionally flicking toward her, as if testing her intentions. Between bites, they stole glances at one another, searching for reassurance in shared fear and uncertainty. The room was filled with silence, punctuated only by the soft scrape of utensils and the occasional rustle of fabric as they shifted uneasily. Yet in those still moments, something subtle began to unfold. A sense of warmth, a gentle kindness in Mary's gestures, the way she didn't rush them, didn't demand anything, just offered her presence. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, their rigid postures softened. The children began to sense that maybe, just maybe, this woman wasn't like the others who had hurt them, and a fragile thread of trust began to weave itself between them, delicate but growing. As the evening stretched on, Mary watched the children with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Their eyes lingered on her occasionally, curious but cautious, small hands fidgeting nervously in their laps. Every glance, every slight movement carried a question she could not yet answer. Could they ever trust her? Could they believe that her kindness was real, not fleeting or conditional? The shadows of their pasts clung to them tightly, whispering warnings of betrayal and disappointment. And yet, there was a faint, almost imperceptible softness in their postures, a hesitancy that hinted at the possibility of connection. The room seemed to hold its breath with her, suspended in a delicate balance between fear and hope, waiting for the moment when trust might finally emerge or be lost forever. Over the next few days, Mary began to gently unravel the threads of each child's past, careful not to rush or overwhelm them. One by one, they shared fragments of their lives, small, hesitant confessions whispered in the safety of her quiet home. She learned of betrayal and neglect, of relatives who had turned their backs, of homes that had offered no warmth or love. One child carried guilt for things beyond their control. Another hid a quiet sorrow that never found a voice. Each story, though brief and broken, revealed the weight of the world they had already endured. Mary listened with a mixture of heartbreak and determination, feeling the pull of her own grief entwined with theirs. She understood, perhaps more than they realized, that these children were as fragile as they were resilient, and that guiding them toward trust and love would require patience, courage, and unwavering care. Among the three, one child's story was the heaviest, wrapped in a bitter sense of betrayal. Their own relative, someone who should have protected them, had abandoned them without a second thought, leaving them to fend for themselves in a world that was often cruel and unforgiving. The child's eyes would sometimes glaze over with the memory, small fists clenching in silent anger and hurt. Trust had been shattered long ago, replaced by a wary vigilance that made even the gentlest gesture feel suspicious. Mary could see the walls built around that fragile heart, and it broke her to know that such young innocence had been treated with such harshness. Yet she also sensed a flicker of hope, a tiny spark that maybe, just maybe, love and safety could finally reach them where betrayal had left its mark. Another child carried a quiet burden that wasn't easily spoken, a heavy cloak of guilt and shame that seemed to press down with every step. Their eyes darted nervously, avoiding contact, as if even a glance could expose the mistakes they believed they had made. Simple actions, a spilled cup, a missed step, would make their small shoulders slump, and a whispered apology would follow even when none was needed. The weight of imagined failures had shaped their world, teaching them to shrink and hide, to blend into the shadows rather than risk being seen. Mary watched with tender concern, recognizing the deep pain behind those timid eyes. She knew that healing this hidden wound would take patience and love, and she quietly resolved to help this child understand that mistakes didn't define them, and that shame could eventually give way to hope. The third child remained almost completely silent, a fragile presence that seemed to shrink into the corners of the room. Tears often welled in their eyes, spilling quietly down small cheeks, yet no words escaped their trembling lips. Fear had taken hold so completely that even the gentlest questions from Mary were met with wide, wary eyes and a tightening of the body. Every sound, every movement in the house felt overwhelming, and the child clung to the shadows as if they were the only safe place in the world. Mary's heart ached as she watched, understanding that this silence was not stubbornness, but a shield forged by pain and mistrust. Slowly, with patience and care, she began to offer comfort through quiet gestures, soft words, gentle touches, and the steady rhythm of routine, hoping that one day the child might find the courage to speak and, more importantly, to trust. As the days passed, Mary watched the children with a careful, hopeful eye. Small gestures, a hand hesitantly reaching for hers, a fleeting glance of curiosity, a soft laugh at a story she read, hinted that walls might be slowly crumbling. Yet the past loomed large, whispering warnings of betrayal, neglect, and disappointment. Every cautious step forward felt like a delicate dance, each moment of connection balanced against the weight of old fears. Mary wondered, with a mixture of anxiety and longing, if they would ever truly let her in. Could these three fragile hearts, hardened by loss and sorrow, find the courage to trust again? The question hung in the air, unresolved and urgent, leaving a quiet tension that made every shared meal, every bedtime story, and every whispered word feel like a fragile test of hope. Mary began to weave the children into the rhythms of her home, introducing small chores and simple routines that gave their days structure and purpose. She showed them how to sweep the floor, tend the small garden outside, and carefully prepare meals, guiding their hands with gentle patience. In the evenings, she would gather them around the fireplace and read stories, her voice soft and steady, filling the quiet house with warmth and imagination. The children listened hesitantly at first, eyes wide and wary, but gradually, laughter and questions began to creep in between the lines. Each shared task and quiet story became a small thread, connecting them to her and, subtly, to each other. In these moments, the walls of fear and mistrust began to show tiny cracks, and Mary felt a fragile but growing sense that perhaps, slowly, love could take root in even the most guarded hearts. Over time, the quiet house began to change. Hesitant smiles appeared on the children's faces. Small bursts of laughter slipped from lips that had long forgotten joy, and shy glances toward Mary grew more frequent. They began to play softly together, inventing little games in the corners of the room, their previous fear giving way to curiosity and cautious delight. Even the smallest successes, finishing a chore correctly, sharing a story, or daring to speak, brought genuine, radiant smiles. Mary watched them with a swelling heart, feeling the weight of her own loneliness begin to lift. The house, once cold and empty, started to hum with life and warmth, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that healing and happiness might truly be possible. Yet, even in these bright moments, shadows from the past lingered, hinting that the peace they found here was still fragile and could be challenged at any moment. As days turned into weeks, a quiet transformation settled over the household. Mary, once consumed by grief and solitude, felt a renewed sense of purpose blossoming within her. Each small achievement of the children, their laughter, their tentative trust, their first brave steps toward independence, filled her with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. For the children, the once cold and empty house had become a sanctuary, a place where fear no longer ruled and where they could rest without looking over their shoulders. Bonds deepened slowly but steadily, stitched together by patience, kindness, and shared moments of care. In teaching, nurturing, and simply being present, Mary discovered that her heart could heal alongside theirs, and the fragile household, built on trust and love, began to feel like home for the first time since the orphans had arrived. Just as warmth and laughter began to fill the house, a shadow from the past stirred, reminding Mary that healing rarely comes without trials. The children's eyes occasionally flickered with unease, subtle hints that their previous lives were not so easily left behind. Whispers of old threats, memories of abandonment, and the lingering fear of betrayal clung to them like invisible chains. Mary sensed it before she saw it, a presence approaching, carrying the weight of unresolved danger. No matter how much care and love she offered, she knew the past would not release them so easily. It lingered at the edges, patient and relentless, waiting for the moment to remind them of the pain they had survived. The quiet moments of joy hung in fragile balance, and Mary realized that the true test of trust, courage, and family was only just beginning. One evening, just as the fading light spilled across the floorboards, a shadow fell at the edge of Mary's doorway. A figure appeared, tall and imposing, carrying the weight of authority and menace in their stride. Mary's heart tightened as she recognized the tension in the children's bodies, the stiffening of shoulders, the wide, fearful eyes darting toward the intruder. One child clutched at Mary's sleeve, trembling, while the others instinctively shrank back into corners. The figure's gaze swept over the room, lingering on each child with unsettling intent, hinting at past cruelty and unanswered questions. Mary felt a surge of protective fear rise within her. This was a danger she hadn't anticipated, a challenge that threatened the fragile trust and safety she had been building. Every heartbeat seemed louder, every moment stretched as the house held its breath, waiting for what this mysterious arrival would demand of them all. The intruder's voice cut through the quiet room, sharp and commanding, leaving no room for argument. "These children belong to me," they said, each word heavy with threat and accusation. The children froze, eyes wide with terror, small hands clutching at Mary's skirts as if her presence could shield them from the looming danger. Mary's pulse raced, her mind scrambling for a way to protect them, to keep the fragile sense of safety they had begun to feel intact. The air in the house grew thick with tension, each heartbeat echoing like a drum, each shadow seeming to lengthen with menace. Fear, anger, and desperation intertwined within her, fueling a determination she hadn't realized she still possessed. She knew she could not let the children be taken. Not now, not ever, and the question loomed over the room. Could she stand alone against the threat from the past and protect the lives and hearts she had come to love? Mary took a steadying breath, feeling the full weight of fear pressing against her chest, yet refusing to let it control her. She looked down at the children, their small faces etched with terror, and something fierce ignited within her, a determination stronger than any doubt. Every memory of loss, every lonely night in her empty home, sharpened her resolve. She would not allow these children to be taken from safety and love. Her hands clenched at her sides, and her eyes locked on the intruder, unwavering despite the trembling that ran through her body. In that moment, Mary understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. And as the shadows of the past loomed over them, she knew one truth with absolute certainty. She would fight, protect, and hold these children close, no matter the cost, for their trust and newfound hope were now her lifeline. Mary's heart pounded as she weighed the danger before her. The intruder's shadow loomed larger, the threat sharp and immediate, while the children clung to her skirts, their trust fragile and precious. Could she really face this alone? Every instinct screamed to protect them, yet doubt gnawed at her resolve. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt small and vulnerable, the walls unable to shield them from the past that had finally caught up. Each second stretched unbearably, the tension thickening like a storm cloud ready to break. Mary knew the children were counting on her, yet she could not predict the strength of the forces arrayed against them. And in that breathless pause, the question hung heavy and unresolved. Could she truly save them on her own? Or was the hope she had fought so hard to nurture about to shatter? Mary stepped forward, her body tense but her resolve unshakable, facing the intruder who threatened the children. The room felt charged with electricity, every creak of the floor, every rustle of clothing amplified in the heavy silence. Her voice, steady but firm, cut through the fear. "You will not take them." The antagonist's eyes narrowed, disbelief mingling with anger, as if they hadn't expected resistance from a lone widow. Mary's mind raced, calculating every possible move, every word a shield, every gesture a line of defense. The children watched, their fear palpable, yet something flickered in their eyes, trust, hope, the faintest belief that she could protect them. Shadows stretched across the walls, echoing the tension between past cruelty and present courage, as the showdown unfolded in quiet, high-stakes intensity. Mary's heartbeat matched the rhythm of the looming confrontation, slow, deliberate, unyielding, determined to defend the fragile family she had fought so hard to create. As the tension thickened, the children began to respond in ways that surprised even Mary. One quietly slipped behind the intruder, knocking over a small stool to create a distraction. Another whispered instructions to the youngest, who hesitated, but then bravely followed, stepping out from behind Mary's skirts to hold the door. Their movements were tentative, imperfect, yet filled with intent and courage, a reflection of the trust and bond they had slowly formed with her. Mary's heart swelled as she realized they were no longer just frightened bystanders. They were active participants in protecting the home and each other. Every small act of bravery chipped away at the antagonist's advantage, and the children's eyes shone with a mixture of fear and newfound confidence. In that fragile, chaotic moment, Mary saw the proof that love and trust could inspire courage even in the smallest hearts. and together they could face the shadows of the past. The air in the room seemed to crackle with tension, each heartbeat magnified in the heavy silence. Mary's chest ached with fear and determination, while the children's wide eyes reflected both terror and courage, glimmering with the trust they had placed in her. Every movement carried weight. The smallest stumble could shift the balance. The tiniest hesitation might allow the intruder to regain control. Shadows danced across the walls, echoing the stakes of this fragile confrontation, and the past's threat loomed like a dark storm ready to break. Time felt suspended, each second stretching endlessly as Mary calculated her next move, every choice a lifeline for the children. The room held its breath alongside them, the tension nearly tangible, as hope and fear collided, and the outcome of this high-stakes moment remained uncertain. Every second felt like an eternity as Mary and the intruder faced each other. The children huddled close, eyes wide with anticipation and fear. The room seemed to shrink around them, charged with the intensity of a battle not just for safety, but for trust, hope, and the fragile beginnings of a family. Shadows stretched and flickered, echoing the uncertainty that hung thick in the air. Mary's heart raced, muscles tense, mind sharp, while the antagonist's gaze was hard, unyielding, full of past authority and menace. Each breath, each tiny movement, could tip the scales. The children's courage, Mary's determination, and the intruder's threat collided in a moment, suspended in time. The question burned hotter than the fear itself. Who would prevail in this confrontation? And would the family they were building survive the storm of the past? As the intruder faltered, the child who had whispered Mary's name stepped forward, trembling but determined. With a voice barely above a whisper, they spoke the truth that had been hidden beneath the burlap sacks all along. They were somehow connected to her past, bound by a secret Mary had long forgotten or thought lost. The revelation hit Mary like a sudden gust of wind, stirring memories she hadn't realized were buried so deeply. Her mind raced, piecing together fragments of old letters, fleeting encounters, and unexplained coincidences that suddenly made sense. The connection was mysterious, yet undeniable, a thread stretching across years and distance, pulling them together at this very moment. Shock, disbelief, and a strange sense of destiny washed over Mary, leaving her heart pounding as the realization settled in. These children were not random, and their presence in her life held a deeper meaning she was only beginning to understand. Mary sank into a chair, her hands trembling slightly as the truth settled around her like sunlight breaking through clouds. It was as if the universe itself had guided her steps, weaving a path that led her to these children who were meant to be part of her life. Every lonely night, every ache of grief, every quiet moment of despair had been leading her here, to a family she had never expected, to a purpose she had thought lost forever. The realization filled her with a profound mixture of awe, relief, and joy, and tears slipped silently down her cheeks. The children, sensing the shift in her heart, drew closer, their small hands reaching for hers, their eyes shining with tentative trust and wonder. In that quiet, sacred moment, Mary understood that destiny had a way of mending broken hearts, of bringing together lost souls, and of creating love where it seemed impossible. The house, once quiet and heavy with loneliness, now hummed with warmth and life. Tears flowed freely, not of sorrow, but of relief, joy, and the profound weight of connection finally realized. Hugs were exchanged, clumsy at first, then tighter, firmer, as Mary and the children embraced the love that had been patiently waiting for them. Laughter began to ripple through the rooms, soft and hesitant at first, then growing, filling corners that had long been silent. Each small gesture, a hand held, a whispered word, a shared smile, wove them closer together, building a fragile yet unbreakable bond. Mary's heart felt full for the first time in years, and the children's eyes shone with the safety and affection they had long been denied. In that gentle, tender chaos, it became clear. Though the past had been harsh and uncertain, love had triumphed, and a new life, rich with hope and belonging, was finally beginning. Even as warmth and laughter filled the house, a quiet truth lingered in the back of Mary's mind. The future was still uncertain. The past had left its marks, and the world outside their small home could still bring challenges and hardships. Yet, for the first time in years, uncertainty felt different. It was tinged with hope rather than fear. Mary glanced at the children, their eyes bright with trust and curiosity, and felt a steady confidence growing in her chest. They had survived loss, betrayal, and loneliness, and together they had discovered courage, love, and resilience. The path ahead might be unknown, but it was theirs to walk together. And as the sun dipped low beyond the horizon, casting long, golden shadows through the rooms, Mary understood that while the future could not be predicted, it could be embraced, with open hearts, determination, and the unshakable bond they had formed. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the fields surrounding Mary's home, and the children ran freely, their laughter ringing out like a chorus of joy. Feet kicked up dust as they chased one another, tripped and tumbled, only to rise again, squealing with delight. Mary watched from the porch, a wide smile softening her face, feeling her heart swell with a sense of peace she had thought lost forever. The wind tugged at their hair and clothes, carrying the sounds of freedom and happiness across the open land. For the first time, the children seemed unburdened by fear, guilt, or sorrow, their small bodies moving with abandon and trust. Every glance toward Mary held gratitude, every shared smile, a quiet promise that this safe, loving world they had found was theirs to enjoy. In that simple, radiant moment, the emptiness of the house, the loneliness of the past, and even the scars of their journey all faded, replaced by the warmth of belonging, laughter, and hope stretching as far as the horizon. Mary stood on the porch, her hands resting lightly on the railing, and watched the children darting through the sunlit fields. Her heart felt impossibly full, a warm, steady ache of love and gratitude that she hadn't known she could feel again. Each laugh, each tumble, each gleeful shout carried a reminder of how far they had all come, from fear and mistrust to joy and connection. She thought of the lonely nights, the doubts, and the sorrow that had once defined her days, and marveled at how life had brought this unexpected family into her arms. The wind carried their laughter toward her, brushing against her cheeks like a gentle promise, and Mary allowed herself to savor the beauty of this moment, the peace of home, the trust of children who now believed in love, and the quiet, powerful certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the sun dipped low over the fields, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Mary's voice carried softly in reflection, a gentle narration of the journey they had shared. "Even broken hearts," she murmured, "can find family in the most unexpected ways." She thought of the children's frightened eyes, the shadows of their pasts, and the fear that had once gripped her own heart. Yet here they were, together, alive with trust, laughter, and love. Life had a way of weaving strange and beautiful patterns, connecting souls who seemed lost, and offering second chances where despair had once ruled. Mary realized that pain and loss could coexist with hope, that courage could bloom from vulnerability, and that family was not always defined by blood, but by the willingness to care, protect, and cherish one another. In that quiet, golden hour, she understood the profound truth of her own words. Even the most fractured hearts could discover belonging, and sometimes the universe had a way of guiding love to those who needed it most. As twilight settled over the small home and the fields grew soft with evening shadows, Mary sat quietly on the porch, the children curled around her or playing gently nearby. The laughter and warmth of the day lingered in the air, yet a peaceful stillness had taken root, a calm after the storm of fear, loss, and uncertainty. She breathed in deeply, letting the cool evening air fill her lungs, and allowed herself to simply be present with this new family she had found. Memories of loneliness and grief softened in her mind, replaced by gratitude and quiet wonder at the journey that had brought them together. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a gentle glow over the fields and the small house, and Mary understood that life's most profound gifts often arrive unexpectedly, quietly, and without fanfare. In that serene, reflective moment, the story paused, hopeful, tender, and emotionally complete, leaving the heart open, yet aware that the future, though unknown, would be met together as a family.